Hello, everybody. It's Monday, September 15th, and this is your Chapo. In just a little bit, I will be talking to Pablo Torre of Pablo Torre Finds Out about some of his recent bombshell reporting as it pertains to American sports, the business of sports, and labor relations within those sports. But before we get to that, it's me and Felix, and just to continue with obviously like the biggest story of last week, and now with some time to consider or sort of begin to maybe kind of half make sense of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. I think we should begin there today. And Felix, and the way I'm thinking about this is like there's essentially sort of two tracks that can be like discussed here. And one is the actual killing itself and the person who allegedly did it and trying to suss out what, if any, motive could be gleaned from it. And then the second is like the political fallout and reaction to it. And I guess like, because that's easier to talk about, let's start there. And I guess I'm going to begin here with the president and how he's taking this all in. And the thing that struck me the most from this weekend, and I know like the Trump administration and their, like allies in the media and elsewhere are certainly, it's very clear what they're trying to do with this, which is to create sort of a martyr that can be used to wave the bloody shirt and advance their cause of, getting rid of freedom of speech and, criminalizing political dissent or political opposition in this country. But the thing that I find funny is that, like, once again, Trump as the leader of this sort of pseudo-fascist movement can't really seem to be bothered to, like, stick to the script or, I don't know, evince, like, any idea that he cares about any of this, Felix. And I guess I want to begin with when he was asked at the White House over the weekend, a reporter asked him, "Mr. President, my condolences to you, sir. My condolences on the loss of your friend, Charlie Kirk. How are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?" Trump's response, "I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction on the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty. Absolutely magnificent construction. We just started it. So it'll get done very nicely, and it will be one of the best anywhere in the world, actually." So even in a moment that like demands it of him, he really cannot even pretend to give a shit about his friend being murdered.
Yeah. I mean, he like did it mid-sentence. He only got through like a few things about it before he immediately launched into, I mean, it's not even a ballroom. It's like a bunch of tents on like in like an open, like an al fresco dining square that's in the backyard of the White House. I don't know what the fuck he's making there. I don't think he does either. I like the clip on Fox and Friends where they were like, "How do we fix this country?" And he went, "I couldn't care less."
Well, he went on to say, "I couldn't care less." He said, "It's going to get me in trouble, but like the extremists on the left are evil because they killed Charlie Kirk. And the extremists on the right, we have extremists, but they're just very mad about crime and they don't want to see it." But he's like, "I couldn't care less."
Yeah. I mean, so like a few days ago, I was looking at like the reaction of the online right, and momentarily the conventional knowledge among people was like, this is for sure, this is a groiped up shouty who did this, and like I don't blame people for immediately jumping on that or thinking that, because all these people who were like, the Saxon has awakened, the one-eyed guy from Valhalla Rising is here, all your favorite guys from medieval Europe are back. All those guys were like very quietly backtracking. Nick Fuentes looked terrified, and a lot of people did not have the tools to differentiate between a modern groiper and a term that many of us were not around to see, a meme kid. And to help us explain what a meme kid is, we have Spencer, our the only employee of this podcast, Spencer, here to talk about this.
So this is something I think really starts with my generation, like cusp of the 21st century, and they're kids that get into memes, but not in the way that everyone is, where you just see like a joke format or whatever and you're like, this is pretty funny. Like, it's like a subculture surrounding memes, like kids who dress up as memes for Halloween, like this guy did. Like, there was a photo going around of him, like, 15 years old in a tracksuit doing a Slav squat, and it would just immediately, everyone my age was like, oh, I knew this kid. I knew this fucking kid. we had one at our school who, in, like, a full year after it happened, he would just be in class and just kind of to himself, he would just be saying, Harambe, Harambe. Just over and over again, like it just like almost like kind of stimming on it. And it was similar type of thing. It was like kids who like a cracked iPod 5S. They would like pull you aside in class and then like hold it up to you right to your face and then show you like the grainiest, most artifacted image of a joke that you saw 2 years ago. There are kids who like just compulsively talk in internet memes, and they're always like 3 to 4 years behind for whatever reason. If this guy, like, they're gonna put this guy on the chair and he's gonna say like, do you know the way or something. Like they're for whatever, like they're so into it, but because their like sense of humor and socialization is so stunted, like they can't keep up to date with anything.
The FBI, and I really want to talk about the FBI response to that, but before we get to that, like, it's been clear that the FBI and others have been trying to work as hard as possible to essentially frame trans people for this killing. If what I've seen so far, it is almost impossible for anyone on the right or left to like jacket this guy as belonging to either group. Because like what we are left with, if we were to believe the investigation, is basically like the meme phrases that this guy posted on bullet casings, which are like
unbelievable.
Like, I don't see anything here other than evidence of like a totally brain rotted, like hyper irony in which the Hall of Mirrors is now completely closed on itself, and there is no more like context, sign, or a signifier. Nobody even knows what they're supposed to believe, and that's kind of the point. But like, what did like these sort of meme phrases like notices bulge, OWO, and Bella Ciao, like what are we to make of the like what message, if any, was being sent with these bullet postings?
So, for starters, one of the things he wrote was, if you're reading this, you're gay. He wrote it on one of the bullet casings, which is like, I like to imagine like the cop that picked it up had a touching fentanyl reaction to it. Like, you know that urban legend?
5 officers were turned gay by looking at this bullet yesterday.
Like, you know that urban legend of that video of Hillary Clinton eating a child's face that made every cop who watched it kill themselves? Like, I imagine there was something similar with that bullet. There's just like 6 cops killing themselves in the area immediately.
That was in the original Philip K. Dick story that they based Minority Report on. That the killer would know that the cop who found it was gay.
So, a lot of these are just like jokes related to like really annoying online subcultures. Like, Notice's bulge was like a furry joke from like 10 years ago that got just endlessly repeated and copied by increasingly less funny people. And the one that says, hey, fascist catch, I think that's from Helldivers. I've never played Helldivers and barely even knew what it was because I've aged out of the following this demographic, but I did do some research on it because this story was making me tweak out a little bit. And yeah, these are all just like internet jokes. Like, they're all, I don't know, like your coworker who is like full volume watching videos that have dubstep blasting out of his iPhone. No headphones, just like iPhone out in the break room. And that's the type of person this guy was. And there's like Bella Ciao. That's an Italian anti-fascist song, but it's also popular with groypers, and I think it was in a video game too. So again, there is no discernible ideology at this point that we can glean other than like, even if he didn't kill someone, you wouldn't want to be in a room with this guy.
I mean, like, yeah, like, I mean, other than the fact that like he looks like by all accounts had like a normal middle class upbringing in Utah. Like there's just not much to go on here, and it's also just like the palpable dissatisfaction of political partisans who want to, like I said, jacket their opponents with the motive for this assassination has thus far been like totally just like futile. Like I don't discern any motive here other than this like I said, like post-reality politics in which like there is really like nothing. There is no meaning and there is nothing real save for spectacular acts of violence that then become part of like your screen or then become the meme itself. Like, I don't know how to conceive of this outside of that. I guess like the political context in which this is taking place, I have been struck because like, Felix, obviously like there's now been this huge like doxing campaign to like compile lists of like hundreds of thousands of people who were like insufficiently reverential towards a guy who hated them for a living, to get people like fired from their jobs. And plenty of people have already been fired from their jobs in the media for just simply, I don't know, directly quoting Charlie Kirk, or just like people, not people who are like, I'm going to jack off on his coffin, as you said last week, but like just quoting him directly. And like, I don't know how you feel about this, but like, I think like there's so much anger and frustration out there that like, that they haven't won the culture war. That Donald Trump being president means that like, does not mean that everyone has to instantly like and respect them.
Yeah, I saw, did you see that, they've been doing memorials for Charlie Kirk at like, most NFL games that have gone on since it happened. And he got booed at a, New Orleans Saints game. And I saw right-wing people were saying that that's because there are so many like leftists in New Orleans. Like, okay, and maybe, I don't know. In fact, I would say that like a lot of the frustration is the fact that like, you know, normals are having a more vociferously annoyed reaction than, you know, whatever, like political commentators or political figures. The mob that like that formed before anyone had even said anything.
I mean, I guess like the line that I'm hearing a lot now is that like this is all like in like the organized attempts to like get anyone who was, like I said, just insufficiently reverential of like the glorious martyr fired from their job is just the consequences of cancel culture. And it's like, you know, don't buy the ticket if you don't want the ride. We're only playing by your rules. The left did this to us, you know, for the last 5, 6, 10 years or whatever. Now we're doing it to you, and you can't cry unfair. Which is like, okay, I guess there's like a certain logic to that, but like, isn't contained in the whole like anti-cancel culture pitch the idea that America got so fucking sick of it that they elected Donald Trump president twice? So I guess I'm wondering, like, how do these people think that, like, isn't the country going to get just as sick of this shit just as fast, of the new sort of anti-woke speech codes and political correctness?
Right. I mean, this is not a novel observation from us. We've talked about this pretty much since the election. This idea that we are in the midst of like a long conservative 2017 or 2020 for that matter, right? It's on a little bit more of a collapsed timeline than that, and not entirely one for one. But the biggest common thread there is just ignoring the obvious signs of either independent or just completely politically unaffiliated, checked out people getting fucking sick of this. I think this entire incident, which, like, if you had just described this on paper, just by the virtue of it being a low bar to clear, one of your least incendiary megastars in your movement, right, in Charlie Kirk, gets killed horribly in front of a ton of people, you would say, okay, that's a, you know, for any political movement, they would be able to wring sympathy out of that.
Right.
They took on that task like they fucked it up in the way that like Homer Simpson fucks things up. They're like, okay, I know what to do. We're all going to go on TV and say that we need to give Stephen Colbert AIDS. And it's like, guys, I don't know. I mean, like, the NFL thing is so it's so illustrative of this to me, because I don't think that all those people who booed him at the Saints game or any of the other shit they're I don't think in a lot of these instances, those are people who would at least identify themselves as like liberals or left wing or anything. I think they're just like, they're fucking sick of this. Just like how the people who elected Biden on the premise that like, oh, you won't have to look at the news anymore.
Right. They want to keep politics out of sports.
Similar implicit promise here. And they, you know, for whatever reason, they're the conservative project of making conservatism fully like just the default set of values for any randomly chosen American. It hasn't gone far enough to where these people will just blindly accept this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I think that's getting it right to it. It's the assumption that Charlie Kirk's worldview and his values, like that the election of Donald Trump means that is now the baseline cultural political assumptions of like everyday Americans. And like you're seeing that now in like the people who are getting fired because like they're mentioning in their, you know, obituary for Charlie Kirk, the things he said and did regarding, I don't know, repealing the Civil Rights Act or how black women are too stupid to get any job that they didn't take from a white man, et cetera, et cetera. And like as evidence of or like counter evidence for the idea that he was some sort of moderate Republican, or he was like he was basically a liberal until the left went so insane. You know, like I've seen people describe him as like a 90s progressive. And it's like, he wouldn't have described himself like that. He was like a right-wing kid his entire life. He was like, you know, like he talked about like he grew up listening to Rush Limbaugh. Like if you were listening to Rush Limbaugh in high school, you were not a liberal or a progressive at any point in this country's history. But what frustrates them is the idea that like I said, like, and you're seeing this a lot in like the kind of the wish casting they're doing about how like, they may have taken our Charlie, but like they have birthed 100 million new conservatives who are going to like change this country. And like, look, I don't know what the long-term effects of a murder like this will be on like American politics or culture, but like there seems something a little bit like trying too hard in like wish casting already what you think 10 years in the future is going to be like, because like they can't get around the fact that like Donald Trump is unpopular and most people don't like him. And most Americans, liberal or conservative or whatever, do not associate themselves or don't want to be associated with the idea that like the Civil Rights Act was a disaster or that like black people like don't deserve civil or human rights. And I think that drives them crazy to encounter the idea that like they are, despite their political success, are still not liked, or they haven't achieved that final culture war victory that like they're hoping that this will lead to.
Have you seen the post where it's like it's Charlie Kirk's widow, and then I guess one of the Eternals from the Eastern Orthodox religion. They have no idea what they have unleashed. They said, I think they mean unleashed. They said unleashed. They said, I don't like this Volvo. The dealership has to take it back. They have no idea what they have unleashed. Same look, St. Olga of Kiev, look her up. And it's like, do you really think that? Do you think that this is, I don't even know the name of Charlie Kirk's widow, but I'm pretty sure she's not an Eternal from Eastern Orthodox. It's such a truism, right? This idea that like, you've made a martyr out of him. Now the 1 million people are going to be like him. And it's like, everyone says that after one of their guys dies, you know? We've said it. Like, everyone has fucking said it. If that was true, then no one would ever get, like, in all of human history, there would be, like, no assassinations. The fact is, it's like, if you are interested in affecting electoral politics, it is generally better to be alive. That is a hard and fast rule. There are exceptions. And like, I get it. If tomorrow, like our greatest political hero, who would it be? Who is our remaining unvarnished?
Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
Yeah.
President G. I don't know.
Yeah.
Claudia Sheinbaum. I don't know.
Eduardo Bolsonaro. If Eduardo Bolsonaro like died in a hot air balloon incident, we'd obviously be retweeting things where it's like, he inspired so many people, blah, blah, blah. But in private, we would be like, oh my fucking God, this sucks. He's not going to be able to go on those hot air balloon rides where he canvassed for votes. I don't know. Yeah, but it seems like, I don't know. It seems like they legitimately think that. And I got to say, prepare to be disappointed, fellas.
Yeah. And another aspect of this story that I followed this weekend was like the FBI response and investigation to this was astonishing. And like, this is our boy Kash Patel in the hot seat, because like, when you put someone in charge of the FBI who has no experience whatsoever his only experience was being investigated by the FBI, and then like he has to like take account for like a nationally televised murder that is of extreme importance to the president and his supporters, and like his response to it was just basically like, okay, let me read here from the so it says here, on Thursday morning, a day after hastily suggesting the person who gunned down Charlie Kirk was in custody, Kash Patel, the FBI director, convened an online meeting with 200 agents around the country to discuss the manhunt. It was a tense affair. Mr. Patel and his deputy, Dan Bongino, made it clear they were under intense pressure to catch the killer of Mr. Kirk. They expressed themselves with such fierce urgency in the view of some participants, it hinted at another motive, to prove they were up for the task. The director wasted no time before calling out subordinates that he said had failed to give him timely information, and was incensed that agents in Salt Lake City waited nearly 12 hours to show him a photo of the suspected killer. Mr. Patel said he would not tolerate any more Mickey Mouse operations, an official on the call recounted. It was one of his few utterances without profanity, the person added. And like, all this is to say, the investigation concluded successfully when the shooter's father turned him in. And they were just like, yeah, he's here he is. That was the fruits of the FBI's extensive investigation, which included like I said, basically trying as hard as possible to imply that like a trans person did this, or that like any trans connection whatsoever to this shooting. And then the guy just confesses to his father, and the father calls the feds and turns him in.
Well, I mean, that is the other thing here that I've only seen a few people state, but I am starting to think more and more, what are the chances they actually got the guy?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just like how do you think Cash's FBI would know do you think they would give a shit? Or do you think this is just, oh my God, we have to look like we're on top of this. Just whoever calls that tip line first, they win the prize. I don't know. I just get the impression like this is just another one of these events that occur in American life with increasing regularity that are like, explosions of like I said, violent nihilism and murder and cruelty that like just are out there. They're investigated, but like just continue to baffle indefinitely. And that like, of which there are already like, like angles you can take to look at this, that, like in a certain light on both sides of the political spectrum. They're like suit, I don't know, a narrative about a conspiracy or something larger at play. I'm not like firmly placing my marker down on any of them, but what I am certain of is that like this will just be another one of these like meta events that will just sort of like haunt our American psyche, and we're like, no matter what you believe about it, you already have a preordained narrative set ready to go. And like, there will be nothing that will be revealed about this case, about the motivations, or about even who did it, that is likely to shake free like anything real or conclusive, because of just like this, like I said, this kaleidoscope of, I don't know, like reference and context, or just sort of the absence of meaning that exists in all of this. Yeah, I did greatly enjoy Kash saying that I'll see you in Valhalla, brother, to Charlie Kirk. Okay, Kash. I felt so bad for Varg when that happened. I know Varg follows like a different thing that isn't like the Viking religion, but it's close enough. Like it's close enough to where that probably stings.
And like, wasn't Charlie Kirk an evangelical Christian? Wouldn't he be disappointed to find himself in pagan heaven?
Yeah. I mean, even if both those guys were pagans, wouldn't like actual Vikings see both of them in Valhalla and be like, what the fuck? wait, what were your jobs? You were media personalities?
Well, anyway, welcome to the halls of Odin. Hope you have fun here. Anyway.
Yeah, are you sure
by the way,
you're
do
the
any of you
right
speak
one?
Danish?
Yeah. We can help you get to, wherever your heaven is supposed to be, but if you're sure you're supposed to be here. Fox's Greg Gutfeld. I picture God asking Charlie Kirk for his autograph.
I mean, wait a second. Wait a second. If you are a sincere believing Christian, doesn't that offend you? Like, have some dignity. The idea that God, creator of the universe, I mean, you could say, you could do the classic newspaper cartoonist thing where, like, he's at the pearly gates and he's like, come on in, Charlie. We got, George Washington is waiting to hang out with you. But to say that God would be like, Charlie, you've impressed me more than any human being since Jesus Christ, my son, and also me.
Yeah. I think that they need they need a third testament for American Protestantism.
Well, funny enough, this did happen in Utah, which is it did create the third testament in a lot of ways. Do you think there's a Mormon connection here that's yet to be explored?
I mean, insofar as it's a great way to get a weird son, yeah.
Actually,
in any other way, I don't know. But yeah, like,
well,
that's
another Mormon connection to this. That, like, I want to say, like, because we've been struggling with like the essential meaninglessness of like these of the hyper politics of just like irony and the total divorce of sign and signifier or meaning from anything. But I do want to talk about, like, Felix, did you see the video of the Mormon TikTok influencer who was like right there at the shooting going live? Because that to me is the richest text that like conveys what this is all about. Like that conveys more meaning to me than anything I've seen in the analysis of like what this all means or what's going on here. Did you watch that video, Felix?
Oh, of course.
It's your boy out on TikTok. There was just a gunshot at Charlie Kirk. We're in Utah. There's a gunfire. This is not a joke. Hey, let's go. It's your boy Elder TikTok. There was just a gunfire in Utah. This is not a drill. There is a gunfire in Utah. Shots fired here in Utah. This is not a joke. Charlie Kirk, Elder TikTok, Mormon Central, Utah. There was a gun that just fired off here at Charlie Kirk. I am not playing with y'all. Hey, make sure you go to church on Sunday. Read the Book of Mormon. This is not a drill. I'm not playing with y'all. Hey, Jesus is Lord. Jesus will protect you. Jesus is your savior, bro. I'm not even lying. Make sure you subscribe to Elder TikTok on Instagram.
He's like, yo, it's your boy. It's your boy. The fact that like you just saw a man be brutally murdered, like 10 yards in front of you. And then you go live and you're like, it's your boy, Elder TikTok here. They don't want the smoke. They don't want the smoke. Yo, like and subscribe. And there are people like screaming and running, fleeing for cover. And you just got the front facing video. You're holding it above your face going, it's your boy here. They don't want the smoke.
Yeah, he fucked up the crime scene by grabbing a bunch of blood-soaked like TPUSA merch, and now he's selling it. He is awesome. Like
the new Shroud of Turin.
That guy is incredible. I'm sure you saw that thing about how Pacific Islanders were arguing over whether he's Tongan or Samoan because neither side wanted to claim him.
With Charlie Kirk?
No. Elder TikTok.
The TikTok.
Yeah.
Well, I think he did have to do a follow-up. He was like, sorry, I'm trying to be a more responsible creator. But it's just like,
it's okay. It's a long road, Elder TikTok. You'll get another try soon.
What I mean is like, what I'm saying is like, the horrifying thing to me is that like the instinct to like go live and start upping your brand like 5 seconds after seeing a brutal murder or assassination is to me like telling as to the motive of the person who pulled the trigger in the first place.
Well, I mean, just to put the focus on Elder TikTok here a little bit, the idea of promoting your TikTok through that is hilarious to me because it's like, are people going to follow you because they think, oh my God, I don't want to miss the next horrible killing? This guy is just so lucky that he's going to be in all of them. He is going to get angles that no one else gets.
I don't want Elder TikTok near any public event.
Yeah, you know, like
lock him down.
It's just in media, you don't want to promise things to your viewers that you can't always deliver, and that's like a tough act to follow up.
Yeah, we talked about like the right wing response to this, and their sort of their playful imaginings about how this will lead to like a final confrontation with liberalism that will like in which they will ascend to be like the new heirs of America, and like any trace of lib thought will be wrung out of schools or Hollywood or just anything, or even what you encounter on the internet. But like what to turn to the other side of like how liberal and supposedly neutral or liberal institutions are reacting to this. And I think here you see like also, if one was to believe that this will presage the like ultimate defeat of liberalism in American culture, that now replaced by a fascist dictatorship, I would think like liberals and their reaction to this is like a good indication. If you're inclined to believe that that's where this is going, their complicity in like going along with this is really telling, because like it's just like how immediately scared they all are, and how immediately like they apologize preemptively for ever disagreeing with Charlie Kirk. And like there's this like presumption that like if you are murdered, then like if you disagreed with him when you were alive or found him distasteful or like a bad political actor, that you are somehow complicit in this murder. That like if you die awfully, that like retroactively your views and what you spent your life and career advocating for become sanctified in a way. And like that's what I'm seeing from the liberal establishment right now. And also like because like this is just an ongoing process. Like, for instance, like their capitulations on like protests as it regards to Palestine, the way that they've fired people or just like did away with traditionally liberal norms regarding speech, protest, and political dissent to like pre-capitulate to like threats from the Trump administration. Is that what you're seeing, Felix?
Yeah. No, I mean, I will say that Ezra Klein op-ed was just like,
he got torched by the New York Times own readers over that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I was a little hardened to see that just like the rank and file libs seem pretty disgusted by it. I mean, regardless of what you think about it, like on emotional level, it is just in cold calculation, in just pure practical terms, it is really stupid to act preemptively guilty.
Yes.
After that, like to just preemptively be like, no, we're sorry, we killed him. Like, what the fuck? Are you fucking stupid?
I'm like, other people have made this point, but like the example of like the flags being like flown at half mast, I don't think the state of Minnesota did that when their own two Democratic politicians got murdered just the other month. And they're doing it for like, I'm sorry, like, look, I don't want to understate like the popularity of Charlie Kirk or how important he is, particularly to young conservatives or like, like a certain kind of young person who has like gotten into politics and like found a voice and a home for themselves on the right. Like just because he isn't popular with us doesn't mean that like nobody cares about him. But like at the end of the day, he is still just like a media figure and a podcaster. And the fact that like his body is going to be like displayed in state, and that like the body itself was flown back to DC on like Air Force 2 without an autopsy taking place, which is another odd detail to like that accrues when you're trying to like make sense of all of this. But like, yeah, to preemptively apologize and be like, you're right, it was us, we killed him, sorry, we'll never do it again. And then also to kind of preemptively like say that, you know what, he had some points. And that's what I mean about this attempt to be like, he was radicalized by liberals, in fact, and he would have just been a moderate Republican. He would have been a Mitt Romney Republican had we not been so mean to them. It just shows me that like they don't like they're so bereft of dignity that they can't even stand up for themselves, and they just like they cringe before the blow even is landed.
Yeah, and it just I don't know. I don't think this is true of like everyone who, their immediate reaction was that this would portend something awful, that this is on balance like a bad thing for in all sectors of American life, right? I'm specifically referring to the people like Ezra Klein here when I say this. But I think for someone like him, to some extent, like, he identifies more with Charlie Kirk than, like, really anyone else you could think of. If your entire job is predicated on, like, this is the episode of our podcast where we talk about fucking the freeway expansion with Charlie Kirk, like, yeah, then you will do anything to try to, in your mind, bring the temperature down so things can be normal enough so you can have these interminable fucking debates with a guy like that. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like wishful thinking that things are still going to be normal enough, that it's still going to be electoral politics as they existed in the previous, like, 50, 60 years before this, for you to be able to do that.
And, like, you can decry, like, culture war politics and, like, identity politics, you know, like, as we have done on this show, for being, like, perhaps not productive or a distraction from other issues. But the thing is, like, the right is heavily invested in this culture war, and they're going to fight it regardless of whether you want to, like, engage with the enemy or not. So if you believe things like, for instance, that the Civil Rights Act was, like, a good thing and shouldn't be repealed, eventually you are going to have to stand up for yourself. And you are going to have to, like, state that, like, people advocating the opposite are wrong. And that's where we get to this idea of, like, debate, because that's what Charlie Kirk made his whole shtick, right? Debate me, prove me wrong. And it was basically like him teeing off against these, like, 18-year-old college students who are, like, you know, passionate in their beliefs, but perhaps, like, look, there's a reason he debated college students and not college professors. And what I find offensive about this whole sort of sacralizing of the idea of debate in American culture is that, like, look, we don't really do debate on this show, and that's not because, like, I'm opposed to the idea that, like, controversial or harshly conflicting viewpoints have no business being, like, I don't know, advocated or contested in public between knowledgeable people. What I take exception with is the idea that, like, you know, he just wanted to debate people about ideas, and he just, like, that's it, that's all he was doing. And, like, my problem with that is that, like, you can defend the things you believe in, but a part of that is recognizing that there are certain things that I don't think are worthy of debate. Among them, do black people or minorities or women deserve rights? Because, like, once you enter into the like a format in which, like, that is up for debate, I think you've given them what they want already, which is the idea that, like, this is an idea worth discussing.
I mean, also, I don't know. It just the entire the idea that, like, okay, you just showed us that we, you know, you're gonna wish that there were still people in the conservative movement who cared about debate. And it's like, yeah, you guys clearly fucking loved that. You really gave Mahmoud Khalil a chance to debate.
Yeah.
You really gave everyone you fucking deported for, like, signing a Google Doc saying that Israel is committing a genocide. You loved giving them a chance to voice their opinions.
Or, like, you know, and the way that this is being talked about in, like, even in foreign countries, like, didn't Keir Starmer chime up to talk about, like, like the idea that we should never put, like, you know, political debate, like, we should never become violent or we should never criminalize it. You're arresting pensioners for holding up a sign that says, "I oppose genocide, support Palestine action." So, like that ship is fucking sailed. And, like, Felix, like, I've seen a lot of that, the thing you're talking about, where they're like, yeah, like, you have no idea what you've unleashed. Like, he was the last conservative to believe in debate, and what you're going to get after is just, like, I don't know, the death squads or whatever. Like, his belief in debate, or, like, making a public spectacle of, you know, owning libs, or, like, you know, moving the ball down the field on, like, increasingly far right-wing ideas as it regards, like, you know, the rights of minorities or women or gay people in this country. And it's just like, none of these people are legitimately concerned or, like, invested in the idea of, like, the public sphere or, like, the debate of conflicting political ideas. This is a show for them. It's entertainment for their side. It's like, it's to boost their morale, not to, like, advance any specific idea or cause in American life. I mean, like, they're quite clear about their motives. And, like I said, like, and I think falling for this idea that, like, that they were like, it's entertainment. It's what we do in a way. But like, I don't hide behind the contention that what we do here is like debate. I'm taking part in a public debate by like voicing my opinions to an audience of people that like are inclined to agree with me. But like, I don't really feel the need to like defend them or debate people who feel otherwise, because it's just sort of like everyone knows what they believe in, and like I personally don't feel the need to like debate the idea that like, I don't know, like that women deserve political and social equality, or that like, Palestinians deserve to live. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not like wholeheartedly against it as a form of content. I do think that there are people who are like very good at it on our side generally, who I think that they get more out of doing it than we would. But yeah, that is not what this guy's career was. It had way more in common with like fucking James Dobson than what's an example of a big debate guy in history? Socrates.
Yeah, and he was the most annoying guy in human history. So I rest my case.
The owl and that boy that he time traveled with. Two of my favorite historical figures.
Like I said, like I don't know where this story is ultimately going to lead. I mean, like maybe in the next week we'll learn some more about the person who allegedly killed him and why he did it. I mean, we are hearing reports that he is not cooperating with the FBI in their investigation. And I just like, I wonder what that entails. Like Spencer was like, do you think when like they have him in the box and they're interrogating him, like he's just replying with just memes that they have no idea what he's talking about?
He's talking about Shrek to them. Well, they're like, it's like, why did you kill? Like, what is this bullet? Like, what does this mean? And he's just like, Rip Harambe. Shrek is love.
Oh my God, he's probably wasted so much storage on the digital surveillance cameras reciting the entire B movie script.
Yeah.
Oh my God, he's making me remember all my like least favorite things from 2017.
They show him the rifle and it's like, was this the rifle? And he just points at it and says, Big Chungus.
We knew he wasn't a fan of Mr. Kirk and President Trump because he repeatedly said of them, the cake is a lie.
Wait, do you remember all those like memes that were like of Charlie Kirk and it just said, hey, liberals, pee is stored in the balls or whatever. Do you think that's why he killed him? He just saw all those awful memes and was just like, yeah, this is the guy you kill, right? Like there was a Taxi Driver type scenario where he like almost shot Chuck Norris and it didn't work, so he went to Charlie Kirk.
I mean, that really... Utah seems like it's the same deal with like Eastern Europe in the 1990s, where it's like 10 years behind everyone else.
Yeah, they just got Nyan Cat there.
Yeah. Oh my, they're gonna start subscribing to us soon.
Yeah, we're gonna get a huge bump.
God. Yes. Thank God.
Crumble cookies are a very like 10 years ago thing. Like back when like really tacky pastry shops were a thing. Crumble cookies are very like, I don't know, something that you would be like dragged to 10 years ago on a date.
Yeah.
Follow the money. And it just leads you to the crumble cookies.
Yeah, we were talking about like it's like a parallax view type thing happening, but it's the Crumble Cookie Corporation doing it.
They showed him the video that was just a slideshow of memes, of right and left wing memes. Like that's how they cooked him into this.
They were showing him like like 4chan memes on one side and then like r/Chapo Trap House memes on the other side.
Like just to make sure that like the shooter will have basically like it will be impossible to discern what they believed in or why they did this. Well, we'll see where it goes. I guess we'll leave it there for the first half of the show. In the second half of the show, now my pleasure to welcome to the show one of my favorite guys from the TV, but he's also got a podcast called Pablo Torre Finds Out. It's welcome to the show, Pablo Torre.
Well, this is a little strange for me because I have heard you from afar for a while, So to be invited into what it is that you do, a real pleasure, I gotta say.
Well, this is sort of a cross-pollination, right? Like, our show usually covers politics, and I'm having you on because you have, in your podcast, broken a number of like bombshell news stories about the NBA and the NFL. And before, I should, as you're aware, our listeners are mostly gamers, nerds, they don't know ball. But before we get into the first story about collusion between the NFL Owners and Players Association, I'm just going to like entice our listeners before they tune out that this story is not just about millionaire jocks and billionaire owners and sports ball. This story, by virtue of the people involved in it, will touch on mega government contractor and consulting firm Booz Allen, the Carlyle Group, who you may remember from such events as 9/11 and the Iraq War, and the cover-up of child sex abuse in Hollywood. So
there's that.
This story has many, many, many sort of tendrils to unravel. But at its heart, of what the story that you're calling Collusion Gate is fascinating to me because it really is a story that upends what you would expect from a players' union and ownership, right? Like, this story really subverts what you would sort of expect to believe about how a players' union would represent the interests of its members in contract negotiations with the ownership of these NFL teams. So, like, there's a lot to unpack here, but like so many catastrophes in American life, this story begins with the Cleveland Browns. Could you talk about how, first of all, who Deshaun Watson is and why his contract with the Cleveland Browns sort of violated this kind of like cardinal sin or omerta among NFL owners?
Yeah. So I should be clear that my show is a technically sports show that is kind of like sport. I call it like sports as I don't know how your mileage varies on the premise of liberal arts education, but to me, sports has always been that. And so the idea that we're going to get to all the things you mentioned, as well as some really, really strange and even darker other things potentially, it's by design. Like, my show is not really for, I don't know, the standard ESPN consumer. It's for people who like have a larger view on why, frankly, child molestation might be a thing we should be talking about in the context of very famous people who don't want you to know about it. And I mean that in a sincere way.
There's been a lot of that going around the news lately.
I dare say that in this case, some people have a point. Not all the people, but some of the people have a point. Deshaun Watson, to bring us back to sexual misconduct. So Deshaun Watson is the guy who is most famous for having dozens of lawsuits, civil suits filed against him because he loved getting massages, and the masseuses subsequently, dozens of them reported that he was effectively sexually terrorizing them. And so in that regard, Deshaun Watson is a headline that came across in that police blotter sort of a way. But in this story specifically, he is also the guy who was given a contract that was truly unprecedented and unique in the modern NFL because he got more money guaranteed, hundreds of millions of dollars, by the Cleveland Browns, which is a violation of what teams like the Cleveland Browns and every other NFL organization wants to do. Because the NFL is a league, and this is the power dynamic between management and labor already sort of coming to the foreground here. It's a league that has been built on the premise that, yes, NBA players can have fully guaranteed contracts, which means whatever, something happens, they still got to get paid. Baseball, likewise.
The Mets still paying Bobby Bonilla to this day.
Precisely. There are teams, billionaires, haunted by the terrible decisions they made. And in the NFL, there are these outs. And basically, you just don't guarantee the contract, and suddenly that power dynamic is just pretty singular in American professional sports. All of which is to say that the Cleveland fucking Browns gave that guy, as aforementioned, star quarterback, a fully guaranteed contract. And the reason this set off alarm bells everywhere was first on the level of like, okay, this seems like the most cynical transaction in the history of professional sports. Fair, but also behind closed doors with these, again, the NFL is nothing but a wildly exclusive country club with all of those teams representing these factions that are ostensibly competitors, but as this story will reveal, are cooperators. some would allege colluders, they all had the same reaction, which is apparently this can never happen again. Not because of the moral reprehensibility, but because he got a fully guaranteed contract.
Or that he's a bad player that was a bust anyway. No, it's because
correct.
Like in the NFL, because like there are so many injuries to players. From their perspective, ownership never wants to guarantee money in a contract and end up paying tens of millions of dollars to someone who doesn't play a single game because they get hurt. Because the NFL is just so much more violent than other professional sports.
And also they're cheap.
Yeah.
There's a desire to not want to have to do it, not having to do it. And then logically, yes, their argument is, by the way, like, this is it's a meat grinder in very real ways. But the point being that this takes us to what's happening behind closed doors, in which this is not merely a thing that you would think is so obvious that you don't need to reiterate it in any sort of like paperwork, because of course all the owners already feel this way. What happens, it turns out, is that it is written down on various emails and pieces of paper in ways that become relevant later.
And now, like, your story and your reporting begins with your basically disclosure of a 60-page legal document that was basically from like the NFL owners like a meeting in March of 2022, and like what is in that legal document, and that like what do those documents show?
Yeah, so the reason I became fascinated with this document is because there was a bit of for those NFL like legal heads, those nerds, there was this question of like, whatever happened to the time when the NFLPA sued the NFL for collusion against guaranteed contracts. So the NFLPA, the Players Association, had this attempt to hold the NFL accountable for things that will be very explicitly spelled out in this document. But the point is, this arbitration, and that's how it's settled in the NFL, arbitration, the ruling never got leaked. No one ever heard about it, which is conspicuous in a sport that loves leaks, and typically in a management labor squabble, right? Like one side will trumpet that they won and vice versa. So in this case, it was just dead silent in a way that became deafeningly loud. And so a couple people, Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, notably, was like, can anyone help me find this document? And I said, I think I might be able to. I love finding out shit. And so this PDF, the 61-page arbitration ruling, what it revealed was what was described to me as the holy grail of NFLPA legal actions, which is to say that it turns out that in this arbitration proceeding, the NFL had to bring 8 of its owners, Roger Goodell, the commissioner, top executives in the league, as well as Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson and Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray and all of these other NFL front office executives, and they had to testify. And not only that, they had to turn over their cell phones. So expedited discovery, the most terrifying
discovery
term.
Yeah. the thing everyone dreads in any sort of legal proceeding.
Yes, all of these billionaires whose entire like task for the league office is prevent us from having to give our cell phones to any sort of like legal process. They all had to do it. And so you get these transcripts, these emails, these slideshow presentations with notes written in the side, in which it becomes very clear that what Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, in communication with the NFL Management Council, and all you gotta know about that is that it's sort of like the, Mike Florio calls it a group that only exists to collude, but they're the group that is sort of like the nexus point on like best practices for all of the teams.
They ostensibly exist to advise ownership on what is the best practices for things like contract negotiations. But like, as you're reporting and like lays out, it's not really advice that you can just sort of consider. Like they like this management council, what they say really goes.
Yeah.
And like to example of the collusion that I wasn't aware of, or like what would be like at least circumstantial evidence of a case for collusion, involves Lamar Jackson when he wasn't happy with his contract with the Ravens in 2022 and tested the open market and didn't get a single callback from any teams. Like, wait, what? This guy is a
So
two-time
funny.
MVP. And what the text show is that they're basically like owners talking to each other, being like, "Hey, great job covering our ass on these contracts. You really made it easier for us." And it's just like the fact that the owner of the Atlanta Falcons would not reach out to Lamar Jackson about possibly him being a starting QB for the Falcons is insane.
No, they needed to have Desmond Ritter be the starting quarterback. So the reason this case was filed was because Lamar Jackson wanted a fully guaranteed contract after Deshaun Watson. Kyler Murray wanted a fully guaranteed contract after Deshaun Watson. Russell Wilson wanted a fully guaranteed contract after Deshaun Watson, and none of them got it. And the NFL Players Association had heard through its own networks that there were conversations among owners about how there was an effort to not give it out. Because it was like, oh, wait a minute, is the dam breaking? And so in these text messages, what you see and hear is that, yes, Lamar Jackson, multiple-time MVP, arguably one of the 3 greatest quarterbacks of his time, there is no offer coming in for that guy. And the linkage here, the dot to connect it is because all of the owners are hearing that they shouldn't make offers that are fully guaranteed anymore, and he's demanding it.
And what it shows is that the solidarity among the ownership of the NFL supersedes even their desire to win games or compete against each other on the football field.
Yes. This is part of why I love this story, is that it reveals what they actually care about. Because on the one hand, you might think that these guys are hyper-competitive championship trophy fetishists who will do anything like sign serial sexual misconductor Deshaun Watson to a deal. And in fact, the irony of how this all played out was that arbitration ruling revealed that no one even wanted to bid on the best quarterback available because more important was something that the NFLPA longs for and cannot seemingly have, which is organized and truly, I would say, staggering solidarity among the billionaires against the players.
You describe the NFL ownership as like it's all one big country club, and I think that's like a good. These guys know each other socially. They sort of roll in the same circles, and they get to decide who gets accepted into the country club in terms of buying an NFL team or having an ownership stake in it. The fact that they would collude among each other is to basically get rid of guaranteed money in the NFL contracts for their players. That to me is a newsworthy story, but it's not exactly a shocking or groundbreaking story.
Yes.
Pablo, where this story gets really fascinating is why would the NFL Players Association, who have been vindicated by this legal arbitration and have like smoking gun evidence of leadership colluding against their members, against players in their contract negotiations, why would they then seek to keep this document secret and then basically everybody shut up about it? Like then we get into this idea of the leadership of the NFL Players Association being essentially controlled opposition for ownership.
It's the thing that was most eyebrow raising was like, wait a minute, this was in here the whole time. Why did no one ever know about it? And the way it happened was the NFLPA's leadership and the NFL's leadership agreed via confidentiality agreement to never talk about it.
Everyone involved in this meeting signed an NDA.
So the leaders of the NFL and the NFLPA both agreed, yes, via legal agreement, we're not gonna publicize this. And in fact, the people who were on some level the plaintiffs, right, the players in that arbitration case, they never saw the outcome. They never saw what happened when the arbitrator ruled in a partial victory in favor of the NFLPA with evidence that we've never seen before. That would be the number one thing you dream of if you were an NFLPA executive, a union official, trying to convince America the way that I talk about those owners is actually rooted in reality, as opposed to what they claim is like the fantastical, hysterical whining of these spoiled millionaires. Like, actually, there's the proof, but it was never, of course, disclosed. And so the question of why gets to the controlled opposition point, which I think you can safely cut to the chase on at this point.
Okay, well, it involves two people, J.C. Treader and a man named Lloyd Howell, because at the exact time that this ownership meeting was taking place, the NFLPA had a turnover in their leadership. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of your story, or eyebrow raising to me, was the way in which the NFLPA went about sourcing new leadership for that NFL Players Association president position or head of the Players Association position.
Yeah, so the regime that had filed the arbitration case alleging all the things that resulted in that hidden ruling, they were ousted. So that was DeMaurice Smith, who was a former prosecutor. Adversarial was his reputation among all of the people around the league and the union. And so the new regime that is installed, and J.C. Tretter was the outgoing president, the player president of the NFLPA, and he had a hand in figuring out who should replace DeMaurice Smith, the executive director. And the executive director job, for those not familiar, is like a forever job. Like a handful of guys have ever done it. You have the job for decades typically. And your job is to be the counterweight to the most powerful sports executive in America, the commissioner of the NFL. And in this case, what J.C. Tretter did was he engineered a process that was cloaked in an amount of secrecy that is comical, which we can talk about. But the basic philosophy that he had was, and this is something that I think is not uncommon, frankly, among various sectors of union leadership, depending on the industry and how much money is flowing through it. There is so much money in the business of football, which is accurate, that, this is the next step, we should just be partners as opposed to antagonists.
Right.
We don't need to be adversarial with the league. We're all going to make more money than we did before. Why shouldn't we just go along to get along and all get rich together? And so that philosophy was key to what happens next.
And like I'm thinking about that reflected in Lloyd Howell's statements first in an edited video clip, and then you uncovered the unedited video clip from his comments where he talked about how like today's players are different than in like back in the day, because like today's players they're entrepreneurially minded and they're interested in capital and making their money work for them. And like, okay, so like, could you talk about who Lloyd Howell is and just the unbelievably like bizarre star chamber process by which he was elected head of the NFLPA?
So J.C. Tretter, who is, by the way, a Browns offensive lineman, outgoing, one of his final acts in his position is to orchestrate a process via amendments to the union constitution, which require you, typically with 30 days notice, to tell the voters and the board of the NFLPA, or the 32 player representatives who decide in a democratic election who should be the new executive director. The Constitution used to require that you had 30 days to tell them who the candidates were. So J.C. Tretter and the executive committee, again, forgive the political sort of like org chart here, but J.C. Tretter and his inner circle of executive committee members vet and decide who the finalists for this job are going to be. And this job, by the way, it's multi-millions of dollars. This is it's arguably the highest profile, best paid labor leader job in America. So just as a context, like there's money in this job. You oversee $1 billion war chest. This is like not something you do as like a volunteer. Ooh, who are the good? I mean, typically you want the good guys, but this is something that you could do for incentives having to do with money. So they pick two finalists, one of whom is Lloyd Howell. And Lloyd Howell, because of this amendment to the Constitution, gets to walk into the room at which he is about to be voted on, and the voters will have no idea who he is until he says, "Hello, I'm Lloyd Howell, and I am a candidate, and this is what I do." What he is, and what unites the two finalists that J.C. Tretter selected for vote, is that he's a businessman. He had no union representative experience. He had no labor organizing experience at all. He had no sports experience. He wasn't a lawyer. He was, in fact, the former CFO of Booz Allen. And he happens to be, and this is something that would have been helpful to be told to the voters, you could argue, before they had to enter this room together. He was a character in what turns out to be one of the largest fraud settlements that a company has ever paid to the U.S. government, because under Booz Allen, according to a whistleblower who testified to this, Lloyd Howell was the guy she went to and did nothing. So that's the guy they ended up selecting.
The fraud settlement case, the fraud case that was brought against Booz Allen that they settled for something like $377 million involved their numerous contracts with the government of Saudi Arabia, which were all losing money for Booz Allen, and in fact was making the company itself in the red. And essentially what the whistleblower showed is that they were then taking money from contracts with the U.S. government, using them to backstop and make whole the contracts that they were losing money with Saudi Arabia.
Just standard NFLPA
Yeah.
stuff. Everybody does that.
Okay, but like weird enough that this guy has no background in unions or sports or anything like that, and like his basically like the top line on his CV was CFO at Booz Allen while it presided over one of the largest fraud cases in U.S. history. But it gets even more insane when it turns out that he had an undisclosed conflict of interest involving the Carlyle Group and their attempts to get an ownership stake in NFL teams.
Yeah, the NFL did this thing, as sports is doing in general, where they give a short list of suitors permission to buy shares, to seek shares in NFL teams as owners. And this is new to sports, but Carlyle, private equity, they are on the list. And wouldn't you know it, but Lloyd Howell had a side gig as a consultant to the Carlyle Group while also seeking and receiving the job of being, as I said, the foremost counterweight and antagonist, ostensibly, to the owners who he is simultaneously working with through this arrangement at the Carlyle Group. So on its face, I mean, just patently ridiculous, but yet it also was not an issue until, it was reported by me and Don Van Natta at ESPN.
What? So like in the selection process with it, like J.C. Tretter, the former player who created this like amendments to like essentially like be like I guess the equivalent would be like on election day you walk into the voting booth and you're like, here are the candidates you're voting for, decide now, you have 5 minutes. The question raised is like, why is the NFL Players Association creating a situation in which like their leadership and the people representing them in negotiations with management or ownership is someone who is like a house creature of ownership? Like does it benefit them individually, or is this part of, like you said, like a larger shift away in sports and American culture in general, away from this idea that there is an adversarial relationship between management and employees?
It's both. I mean, individually for J.C. Tretter, like he wanted to be, this is in my reporting, he wanted to be eventually the executive director long term. Could not because of the way the timeline shook out. And so the theory was Lloyd Howell is a bridge candidate, a bridge quarterback on the way to getting the real starter in there long term, which would have been J.C. Tretter himself. And so he is, by the way, the possessor of one of the most invented titles in NFLPA history, which was Chief Strategy Officer, which Lloyd Howell gave him, making him one of the highest paid executives, and also the guy who actually knew about the union that Lloyd leaned on for all of his decisions, I am told. And so there is just that thing of the Game of Thrones that J.C. Tretter is trying to install himself long term. And then broadly, there is that trend in which, as you put it before, and as Lloyd Howell put it, like, we're all CEOs. We're all businessmen.
CEO at me.
Yeah, I mean, like, truly, like, everybody knows what it's like to be an owner now, so why don't we all treat ourselves like we're all on the same team? And that fundamental misunderstanding of, like, A, not just, like, the history of labor relations, but, like, B, sort of, like, the general rapaciousness of the people that they are specifically needing to counterbalance, because all of this, of course, is a negotiation, is just one of the more, I mean, this is just my now editorial position, having now studied this for whatever, the last year. It's just one of the more naive understandings of what the NFL is willing to do for you, because they're not going to do anything and they don't have to. And all of this is actually quite amusing to the people who you actually helped by burying the thing in the first place.
What do you... Have you noticed, or like, what do you make of, like, since this story has broken, maybe I'm wrong, but like I have not seen too much reaction from current or former NFL players expressing any kind of outrage or even any opinion whatsoever on the collusion between their players association and the ownership of the NFL.
Yeah, and that's the third thing that's really important to mention, which is that the reason this can happen with one guy politically, strategically, as per his title, shaping an electorate and informing or under-informing them, is because the NFL Players Association has one of the hardest jobs when it comes to organizing in labor relations in America. You have a union where ostensibly, by the way, Tom Brady's on the one hand, and on the other end of the spectrum is like a practice squad guy who's just trying to hang on. the, of course, revolving door of employment. And the average career length, is famously the shortest of all the major sports. And you have these guys who just don't actually share the same incentives. If you're thinking about organizing as employees buying in such that self-sacrifice can bolster a long-term strength, in the NFL, almost uniquely among sports, there is really no ability to think long-term. It's always, because of the injury risk and the meat grinder, it's always about the immediate near term. And so you have this body of players who they just don't care nearly as much as you would hope they would from the perspective of what's it like to be the leader of their union.
Contrast that with the Major League Baseball Players Union, which is one of the most probably the most powerful in American professional sports. What accounts for that discrepancy? Because I remember the other week there was a story about what's his name on the Phillies threatening to strangle
Bryce
Rob
Harper.
Manfred.
Yeah,
Bryce Harper of the Phillies, basically if you come in our locker room talking about a salary cap in the Major League Baseball, we're gonna beat you up with bats right now. We're gonna do
I'm going to
practice
curb
on your
stomp
knees.
the commissioner of baseball. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was Bryce Harper, big time Major League. He was basically threatening the commissioner of Major League Baseball if they even broached the idea of a salary cap. What accounts for this discrepancy in the bargaining power or relative union power of a sport like baseball to football?
It's a little too convenient for me to say guaranteed contracts, but it's not far off in terms of just the emblematic difference, right? So in baseball, you have long-term guaranteed contracts in which guys have some amount of security. Of course, you have the differences in terms of lifespan of careers. You also have, as a matter of just the lack of turnover in terms of just changing of teams, that is different. But also it's the history of the union. If you go back to Marvin Miller, who is the lion of sports organizing, the MLB PA's former executive director, the late, great Marvin Miller, who wrote books literally about this. There is sort of an original sin of how the perspective is inherited over the generations between players. And baseball has a really strong history. I should say now, by the way, despite Bryce Harper's unilateral strength and desire to reorganize the face of Rob Manfred.
His strong negotiating position.
Yes. Despite that, they have their own issues relative to the days of Marvin Miller. So broadly also, labor unions in sports, I would say, are just weak right now. And it's because of the larger thing of we're all getting rich. Why do we really care as much as these crotchety old, former ghosts want us to?
And also, if you are a superstar athlete, the money you make on your contract negotiated with the owner of your team is really that's a little bit extra when what the money you're really making is on endorsements, advertisements.
Yeah.
Since these stories have broken, there has been movement here. Lloyd Howell has resigned. His position became untenable. What can you tell us about his resignation and then the subsequent, how weird the story gets even after that?
Yeah, so Lloyd Howell, who should have resigned for any number of reasons that already have been made clear to you and your
Sorry, I just want to bring up one more time the edited video that you played on Pablo Torre Finds Out, where you found, was it the Florida Sentinel Post or something?
Yes, a local paper in Florida.
It had 4 views, and it contained his unedited comments in which he said, quote, there are some, quote, of investing in the NFL, quote, there are some very reputable firms in the mix. Do you think the Carlyle Group was among the ones he was thinking about?
Just a totally uncompromised opinion for a guy to have in that role. Look, the thing about Lloyd Howell was you can point to the fraud settlement at Booz. You could point to the side gig with Carlyle. You could point to the fact that he, again, suppressed via confidentiality agreement the holy grail for his union in an ultimate go-along-to-get-along move. You could point to any number of ways in which he was rank incompetent. And yet the thing that was the straw that broke his back was the fact that there were now, in the chase for more Lloyd Howell details, documented receipts at Tootsie's, which you may recall as the largest strip club in America. In South Florida, where Lloyd Howell, by the way, Lloyd Howell was living. He was living in Miami and kind of in D.C., where the union actually is based, but he was living in a luxury apartment in Miami. And there are these receipts, and ESPN's Don Van Natta got them, where it was proven that the dude expensed the Players Association for like a 7-hour-long, I will editorially call it a bender. He might dispute that, but an odyssey at Tootsie's.
If you're spending 7 hours at a strip club, I mean, like, I don't know, the buffet maybe.
Yeah, but that was expense. The car was waiting. It took him right. It was airport Tootsie's home in the course of like 8 hours in the receipts. And so that seemed to be what was the last straw. But really, it was the accumulated pressure and finally the exposure of like, so what's going on over there? And then shortly thereafter, J.C. Treader, the aforementioned chief strategy officer, who was, by the way, positioning himself to take over for Lloyd Howell in that resignation. Once it happened, he also resigned because of pressure that was effectively put on him by the reporting I was doing, in which it was very clear that he was actually, if anything, the real brains behind how the union was making decisions around its behavior with the NFL.
So they were like, okay, Lloyd Howell resigns. That's embarrassing. You know, it was a screw up. He wasn't vetted properly. So then they're like, well, let's make sure the guy that comes in after him has a spotless record, and there's nothing there that could become potentially controversial or a problem for us. So that brings us to David White.
The runner-up. This is the other finalist that we teased earlier. The guy who didn't get the job.
He was sort of like the Judas goat that was put in there to be like the obvious wrong choice. To sort of like push everyone to like the pre-concluded outcome of Lloyd Howell.
It's funny in the post-mortem to see all these people leaking. Like, no, at first it was no, we wanted the other guy, not Lloyd Howell. And now it's revealed that David White, the former head of SAG-AFTRA, himself, by the way, and there's so much
at least
reporting.
He has union experience.
So has union experience, and I think the key part, which we report too exhaustively for me to summarize here with you probably, his reputation entirely at SAG was as the pro-business candidate whose mentor was the guy who went from SAG to go run the studios, who in fact hired David White as a lawyer, as the counsel for SAG, to defend him when he personally, this guy, his mentor, was in his own scandal around, guess what? Having a quiet, secret side gig on the board of Netflix while being the head of SAG. So like that's David White. And that doesn't even get to the fact that he also effectively covered up a child molestation scandal that was exposed in a documentary called An Open Secret that pointed out with interviews on camera that SAG's effectively the face and the leader of their Young Performers Committee, which was for child actors, was himself a child predator with an admission on tape. And David White sent lawyers saying you can't mention SAG at all in this documentary, effectively trying to whitewash the reality of the organization that he was in charge of, which is to say, in many ways, we've buried the lead, but that's David White.
Well, I mean, is he currently in this position?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
Okay, so like no changes there.
By the way, the reason I'm glad to talk about this is because I feel like I'm going insane. Like David White is still in charge of the union. The players, there are a couple now players who have sort of like raised their hand and said what's going, like Darrelle Revis has been like, what's going on here? And I'm getting DMs from some players and stuff. But genuinely speaking, like, it's the season. Guys are busy. They're trying to stay employed. Revolting against yet another executive director doesn't seem to be high on their list. I would say that if they got a ride in the car sometime, they should listen to the episode because it's not great for your union.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, this gets into like, I guess why I wanted to have you on, because like we see in this story like so many of the ways in which the world of sports and entertainment and politics like seem to kind of follow the same rules. There seems to be this bleed over in terms of how money and power really operates. And, you know, surprise, surprise, it also touches on, you know, child sexual predators. But Pablo, I guess like one of the reasons sports fascinates me outside, the competition and, regional antagonisms and just talking shit to your friends, is that, like, I think it's like a canvas on which Americans can project and see reflected back to them their attitudes and anxieties about so much of American life, like race, gender, culture, as we talk about labor relations and class. But it's also like a universe of entertainment in which, like, people invest in it because the conflict that they see and the characters that they follow are governed by a set of rules that make sense, and everyone understands by them and plays by them. And, like, the universe in between the lines is, like, knowable to a certain degree. But, like, what your reporting seems to imply here is that, like, in like much of the rest of American life, money and power operate in ways that are different than we are all sort of encouraged to believe. So, like, Pablo, what do you think that this story says more broadly about the state of labor relations, but also just American culture in general?
Yeah. So sports has never been more important, given the fragmentation of everything in 2025. In American life, it is the lone monoculture.
It's like the last shared monoculture that we have. Really,
it's the only place, plausibly, by the way, where people who consume nothing else in common might find each other rooting for the same thing and palpably experiencing an in-person thing that is, frankly, rejuvenating, given post-pandemic attitudes and all of that, right? So that's the promise of sports. The reality of sports, though, is that sports, for that same reason, has never had more money sloshing around it. And so the whole idea of, who also loves Saudi investment? Sports. Do you know who also loves a way to, compromise the rules of what you would assume would be strictly enforced fair play? But the billionaires who, in every other sector of their profession, of their day jobs, compromise that. And yet they do it, of course, as well in sports. And so for me, like, the whole thing is never been more popular, never been richer. And for those same reasons, these owners, right, this new class of billionaire owner, I would say, even looking ahead, you have a bunch of guys who really do like sports, but they also are reckoning with the ways in which sports is governed by these ostensibly meritocratic rules and regulations that prevent them from simply buying the thing they want the most. They want to win. They want adoration. But there are these rules, salary caps and union regulations and elsewhere, that prevent them from truly using their money in the way that they think they should. And so that tension of humiliation is on the line if you lose, and yet they can't quite use their money in the way that they thought. It provides this, like, beautiful, fucked up petri dish for all of these big picture themes about what it's like to be in the United States right now.
Well, I often think, like, it's football season now, and, like, Sunday NFL football is like the secular church of America. When I think about everyone watching the games on Sunday, you're watching the games, you're enjoying them, but for most people, in the back of their mind, it's that Monday morning rolling around where you go back to work, and you go back to working for your boss or having to earn a living. Through sports, how do you think that the American sports fan views the relationships between players and owners? Do you think that they see that as analogous to the relationship that they have to their boss and their working life, or do they see it as like a sort of as like people who have escaped that pressure of having to work for someone for a living?
I think it's changed over time, because one of the big movements in sports and just like American life again has been like the rise of big data, the rise of like the moneyballization of everything, the rise of the front office in fantasy sports. And so I think it's interesting, right? Like, you used to grow up, back in my day, you grew up wanting to be like a shortstop for the Yankees or whatever, a quarterback. And now I think people are fetishizing
about being an owner.
Yeah, man, they're fantasizing about being a CEO, an owner, most ideally. By the way, LeBron James himself, every player wants to be an owner in an unironic way, and every fan feels the same. And so in that regard, I think there's also just the historic, and this is a long-standing complication, right? Where if you're a fan, the owner stays, the players change. And these players, they seem to get all the girls, they're so rich. The idea that they would have complaints in any way makes them seemingly alien from a solidarity perspective as a worker. Right. And of course, the larger context, put it in a graph and see how much now you've learn something, I think, if you don't care about sports at all, about like the relative power imbalance between even the most famous players and the worst owner. You realize that they're not on the same side of the actual economic aisle. It's quite different. So sports in that provides this window into caring and thinking about American labor relations, but through this funhouse mirror, where the question is, can you see yourself in these guys? And because we are fans rooting for Laundry, and that Laundry is embodied by this old motherfucker who's owned the team for 80 years, in which you seem to have aligned your desire to do this forever, and the players don't, as they move around and change teams, and player empowerment in scare quotes becomes a thing. It all is colliding right now in a way that, again, is messy. It's very messy.
And it's that people underestimate the gap between even 100 millionaire and billionaire. And I remember a long time ago, we had Bomani Jones on the show. And one thing he said that stuck with me is that given the value that he is worth, LeBron James is probably the most underpaid human being in world history. Yeah. And it doesn't seem that way. And he's not even complaining about because of all the endorsements or whatever, but the value that he creates for the ownership of a team with his labor, what he can do on the court, the attention he brings, the excitement, the fandom, he is blasphemously underpaid in terms of what his NBA contract actually is.
Oh, there's the convenient pro-billionaire socialism, which is, of course, reflected throughout politics now, that is clearly essential to how every collective bargaining agreement has been struck. And so, by the way, this extends to other stories that I'm currently swimming in with salary cap circumvention and why should you care about that and who's doing it. Spoiler alert.
Pablo, you've been snitching. Let's be honest here.
I've been accused of being a snitch, which is something that I genuinely think it's delightful for people to be so unfamiliar with investigative journalism that they just think that I am a snitch. And in that regard, and by the way, to that point, so this episode, which I won't even begin to get into because it's too long, but trust me, there's just a ton there if you're interested in the thing we just talked about. The story of Kawhi Leonard and Steve Ballmer, the richest owner in all of sports, former guy who ran Microsoft, obviously.
You may remember him from the famous Start Me Up Windows 98 video.
Yes, from the various pit stains and just truly unhinged sort of enthusiasms. That guy. The fact that I have been investigating how he has been circumventing the salary cap to pay Kawhi Leonard more and more and more money in a way that's unprecedented in pro sports. I understand if it may read in that 5-second summary, I am trying to get Kawhi Leonard paid less. I assure you that is not my intent. What I am doing is showing how the richest owner in all of sports is himself a character study in all of the psychologies I've mentioned, in which that guy will do seemingly anything to get the thing that he cannot buy for himself. And what does it say? That guy has been orchestrating, allegedly, per my reporting, the most unprecedented scheme to deceive the NBA in the modern era of sports. It all kind of fits together.
Just real quick, it's paying Kawhi Leonard $21 million under the table to plant trees. Am I getting that right?
$28 million. But also $20 million in equity in the tree brokerage. So 48 total on top of the max contract he signed. And my point being, though, I'm not snitching on Kawhi. I'm literally investigating the richest owner in all of sports. If that's actually why I'm interested in this, and I think that might now be clear based on the conversation we've had, but that's the person I'm actually afraid of in terms of how am I delicately reporting this story.
Given that the story we talked about does touch on, Booz Allen, the Carlyle Group, run by former presidents and former heads of the CIA, are you going to be the Michael Hastings of sports journalism?
Oh my
here?
God.
Is someone going to tackle you, Pablo?
Listen, tell the world my story. I am very happy. I have no thoughts that would indicate anything but a total contentment with my lot in life. I just ordered food that I plan to eat. My belts are all, I don't even wear them anymore, frankly. So,
Well, I mean, you referenced it. I know you got to go. We don't have enough time to get into the Steve Ballmer, Kawhi Leonard
We could come back once I survive or not, and you can assess it.
It is again very very funny and fascinating about like the richest owner in all of American professional sports circumventing the NBA salary cap to pay Kawhi Leonard to plant trees. There's too much there to get into, but Pablo Torre, I really want to thank you for your time today, hanging out with us.